So, continental drift theory. What are some fundamental questions about it? How did Earth form? What created the oceans and crust? How did crustal differentiation between oceans and continent happen? How do we explain the location of the continents? Did they move? And what was the nature of initial primordial crust? How to explain volcanoes, islands, earthquakes, and fold mountains, which have unique features like they're unique to Earth. They are very tall and large. They have marine sediments. So the earliest series they talked about continents being permanent and immobile. So this could not explain the fold mountains, earthquakes, and volcanoes. So some interesting observations about continents are jigs of it, which was given by Francis Bacon and Benjamin Franklin. Uh, and the Snyder in 1800s, he talked about the similarity of coal fields in US and Western Europe, Appalachian, Newfoundland, and Pennines. And Taylor in 1908, he gave the earliest interpretation of continental drift. He talked about Laurasia, Gondwana Land, Tennessee, and Trans-Eurasian mountains. Now coming to the Wegener, he was a climatologist. His aim was to discover its past climatic history. He studied rocks, fossils, and sediments. He used works of the Francis Bacon and Snyder and Taylor. He put together all these observations. That was his brilliance, and he gave a grand hypothesis called CDT in 1912. He was not a geologist or geomorphologist, he was a climatologist, and he studied these things to give the past climatic history. So he used two published works, which are Edward Sear's Sealsima knife concept and Taylor's continental drift hypothesis, in which he talked about Laurasia, Gondwana Land, and Trans-Eurasian mountains, and also gave a driving mechanism, which will be the biggest criticism of CDT. Coming to the postulates of the Wegener, he talked about Seal continents and Sima made up of ocean and mantle. This is floating over, Cl is floating over Sima, but in reality lithosphere floats over astronosphere, so this is wrong. And during the Carboniferous times, which is around 400 million years ago, there was a supercontinent called Pangaea and a super ocean called Panthalassa. So this was known to Wegener and others also, but he could not explain how Pangaea formed and what happened before Carboniferous. And during the Mesozoic times, early and mid, during 230 to 180 million years ago, Pangaea broke, and the pieces started moving northwards and westwards. So Wegener did not initially explain why did the Pangaea break and why movement towards north and west, but he explained it, and it became the biggest criticism. And Seal continents drifted over Sima oceans. While this is happening, continents scraped, deformed, and accumulated the sediments of ocean floor at their leading edge. Since they are moving towards west and north, they piled up on the western and north edges of the continent, and these sediments piled up as the fold mountains. So this is also wrong. So all these three postulates are wrong according to the PTT, which gives the explanation. Continents do not drift only north and west. Continents do not float and scrape the ocean floor. Fold mountains are not formed in the way Wegener had explained. Now some hypotheses with respect to fold mountains. This was very revolutionary at that time. It challenged the permanency of continents and oceans. So the Wegener's dynamic mobile crust theory hypothesis, it challenged the permanency of oceans and continents, which challenged the Harold Jeffrey ideas. Now coming to the driving mechanism, during the early 20th century, much about the Earth's interior was not known to Wegener or Taylor, so they could not give the accurate explanation of the theory. The Taylor gave the driving mechanism, which Wegener simply copied. So Taylor's explanation was based on Earth's rotation, gravitational and tidal pull of Sun and Moon, and imbalance between center of gravity and center of buoyancy of continents floating. All three are wrong, and they become the biggest criticism of CDT. So Wegener took this mechanism. Harold Jeffrey, who talked about the permanency of continents oceans, proved all of them to be wrong, and CDT was discredited, due to which Wegener died a very sad death. And coming to the evidences as given by the Wegener, first is shape jigs of it, which was given by the Francis Bacon and Benjamin Franklin. So we have seen this already. And the east coast of South America and west coast of Africa, and southeast coast of Africa, and the coast of Madagascar, they fit together. Structural and matching rock types. Now the matching is of composition, age, and orientation. We have Borborema Highlands and Fota Jalan and Loma Mountains and Patagonia and Angola. These rock types match, and this match is also found at 1000-meter isobath under the sea. This was found out by Edward Bullard. Coming to the fossil evidence, Wegener had a distribution of prehistoric and Mesozoic fossils of plants and animals. He used it, and the distribution was like this. We have the Glossopteris here, Mesosaurus here, Listrosaurus here, and Sinosaurus here. So this distribution was unexplainable before Wegener gave his hypothesis. So according to Wegener, these continents were once joined, life evolved, later continents broke up, therefore the distribution of the fossils. Now coming to the paleoclimatic evidence, Wegener explains the climatic anomaly across the world. The two observations are about the richest coalfields and glacial evidences. The richest coalfields are in Appalachians, Pennines, Ruhr, Donets, Kuznets, Urals, northern China. But these are all in temperate, cool latitudes, whereas the dense forests, rich and dense forests, are in mostly in the tropics and equatorial, but they do not have the richest coal in the world. Now, coming to the glacial evidences, the southern part of South America, South Africa, in Durban, and Talcher in India, some parts of Australia, they have glacial evidences. How do we explain this?